Welcome to Slashback Cinema, the podcast where we rewind to the glory days of 70s and 80s horror classics. I am Shawnee Luft.
And I'm Ryan Drymiller.
We miss those iconic and cheesy horror films from our childhood, from slashers to the supernatural, so we're here to rewatch the classics that made us scream or maybe cringe a little bit and find out if they still pack a punch or just make us laugh. Ryan, what is on the menu for today?
Today we are serving up Altered States from 1980. This was directed by Ken Russell and starred William Hurt, his first major role in film.
He came out and he's like already William Hurt. He's like fully formed. If you picture William Hurt from the 80s, that's how he is in this movie. He doesn't seem like he's cutting his teeth. He seems like he's ready to go.
Yeah, definitely a strong performance from him in this movie. Very believable as a completely obsessed scientist going off the deep end.
So if you were to explain the plot of this movie in a couple sentences, how would you put it? How would you explain it? Good luck.
A psychologist, or
is he a psychologist or just a psychologist?
I think they were just calling him a psycho. Okay. But he's the scientist who experiments with these psychedelic drugs in a sensory deprivation tank. And then he starts having these visions and he believes he's tapping into or seeking out the original self or genetic memories. So that's the whole setup for this one.
Yeah, that's basically the story. He's trying to regress. Do we have a sense of like why he's trying to do this? Like what's motivating him?
He talks about in one of the first scenes where he meets Emily, his future wife, where they're having that moment of intimacy. Yeah. And he's having all these visions and he's basically saying that he's seen all these saints and visions since he was a kid. So clearly, even before he got into the drugs and the sensory deprivation tank, there's something going on with him. And it seems like he's got this deep seeking or desire to understand the nature of consciousness and where humanity and humans come from. So it seems like his path was already set before he built out this professional path for himself.
Yeah, he kind of talks a little bit in that scene, I guess, right after he's with his, I can't remember if it's his wife or his girlfriend yet at that point in the movie.
It was his girlfriend, yeah.
And he's kind of talking about how he wants to seek God, and he drops a book of Revelation. This is the second time Revelation has come up on the podcast.
Yeah.
And the religion stuff, I felt like it kind of dropped out. Like it's not as if, it doesn't end where he interacts with God. That part of the plot seems like it doesn't really directly explore it. He just seems like he's trying to explore the idea of messing with his mind with drugs and deprivation tanks, and it kind of slowly causes him to lose it.
Yeah, and he was definitely haunted by his father's death, and talks about it being one of his last words that his father spoke was terrible or something, like he could use it on his deathbed. And so the religious symbolism and some of that does drop off, but we can talk about it more later. But the visions and the way his psychedelic trips manifest are very hellish. It's very Hieronymus Bosch and Dante. I don't think he was having a good trip. He could have gotten some bad drugs.
It reminded me a little bit of like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where they're using the film to make all these weird colors and images and shocking little visuals. It seems like every time he does it, he goes to a weirder, creepier, crazier place. That's actually part of what I found confusing about this movie is he has these hallucinations. Everyone seems more unpleasant than the last. And yet I was struggling to like understand this movie at parts. I mean, the plot makes sense, but he is obsessed with having these visions and regressing to an earlier state of mankind or something. But when it happens, it's super disturbing, and he seems worse off for it. Each time he does it, he seems worse off. So it's a little unclear to me, why is he doing this at all? What is motivating him? And the only explanation he gives is that one talk he has with his girlfriend. And so I found myself often scratching my head going, it seems like maybe if you ease up on the ketamine, this won't be such a problem.
Yeah, my take on that was if you dig back into ancient religious history, and specifically the contemplative traditions, there were a lot of different ways that you could go in terms of being a truth seeker. And in the case of the Buddha, there was a lot of different ways that he explored. Eventually, the Buddha found the middle way, but he had practiced these ascetic or extreme practices of torturing yourself or putting your body through these extreme things to break through to the other side. So that's how I framed up what Ed Jessup was doing. He saw where he wanted to go, and it was consequences or impacts be damned. He was going to find the truth or the true source, but it didn't really go that well for him.
Yeah, right.
So the movie unfolds, you're like, oh my God. This one definitely falls into the category of body horror, which was big in the 80s. You had The Fly from Cronenberg, and there were a lot of werewolf movies that probably fall into the same category.
Right.
Wolven and American Werewolf in London and Howling. Film.
Right. Yeah, but it's got those scenes of he's looking at his arm and it's like deforming and his legs are deforming, and then the camera pans away, pans back, and then he's back to normal. So you're not quite sure. Is it actually happening? Is he just seeing this? He seems like he's just kind of losing it. Did you see this movie in the 80s? I don't remember this movie at all.
I did. So I saw this movie when I was in middle school, and it was on, like, for those who are of our age will understand what I'm about to say. We didn't have cable, so we had on TV back in the day, you had VHF and UHF. And UHF was the fuzzy, staticky shit, and there was 3 or 4 channels. They would put on public broadcast network. They would do local programming, but then they would also show movies. Like there was a lot of Godzilla and all that, those old campy horrors movies. But then every once in a while, they would cut one that was like kind of current. So I think this came out in 84, 85 to UHF, and it would show up on TV. You'd be like sitting around watching TV, and I remember clicking around. Obviously, it was heavily edited, but so I saw it as a small kid without really understanding, the whole psychedelic drug thing or whatever. But I watched it, and I was definitely like, "Oh my God, what the hell is going on?"
All right, that
makes
sense.
Body distortion,
right?
The Indians in Mexico, the psychedelic visions. I don't remember how much they left in of some of those sequences where he was on the drugs. I remember his ape-like, more primitive self-expression scene. And then I did see it later in college, which was a different framework, and now watched it for this as well.
I have no memory of seeing this movie. I feel it makes a lot of sense, Ryan, that you this movie, you saw this. I feel like I understand you better now. This movie, it feels like a drug trip where it's of interest to the guy who's experiencing the hallucination. But if you're not also experiencing the hallucination, if you didn't do whatever that guy did, you're just sitting there like talking to a person that just dropped acid and staring at this person who is obsessed with all the colors and lights and everything's melting around him, and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's what it felt like to watch this movie to me. Like, I don't
you need some professional help.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why you're doing this. You don't seem to be enjoying it. I'm sure that I'm enjoying it. I have no idea what's happening. I don't know why you're doing this to yourself. What I did like about the movie is it is really visually inventive. It's 1980s, so they don't have anything like modern movie technology, but they did a lot of cool things with film to kind of communicate the weird visual trippiness. I know it felt like if you were high and watching this movie, that would be quite an experience because it's a weird movie.
There's a way that Hollywood movies show psychedelic or tripped out experiences with, the fractal patterns and the colors. This movie didn't do that. It was visually intense, like you're saying, but almost in a very dark, disturbing way with that first scene with the fireworks, and then he's having all these flashes. And I did think that scene where he's gone to Mexico, he's gone to the cave, they've caught his hand, he's having that whole trip. And I thought it was neat the way they represented ego death in that scene, because it's him and I think it was Emily, his wife.
Yeah, that's his wife. His girlfriend who becomes his wife.
Right. And then they start to dissolve or change into sand, and then they just get dissolved by the wind. I thought that was pretty cool and a nice way to show that.
So what were some of your favorite scenes? Was there a particular moment that stood? I mean, I feel like you have to talk about he literally regresses into becoming a caveman, I guess. That's the thing, is for a while in the movie, it feels like, is he just kind of losing his mind because of these drugs he's on? But then this one sequence, he really does seem to regress to an earlier state of human being. And he becomes this kind of gorilla-like ape-man, caveman, and then just kind of runs around and harasses the animals at the zoo.
That scene definitely stood out to me. But then leading up to it, he's hallucinating and his arm is distorting and bubbling, and then his whole chest is rippling. I think he was in bed with one of the students. It was a little bit of a shady scene. She's like, "Are you all right, Dr. Jessup?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm good." And then meanwhile, he's obviously not well.
Really, I gotta say, it did disturb me that he's sleeping with students that still call him Dr. Jessup when he's sleeping with them. I found that both uncomfortable and also did not reflect well on him as a professor.
No. And then he opens the door and the floor is lava and he's falling into that pit and then snaps out of it. Yeah, the sequence where he regresses and becomes that smaller ape version of himself. I did queue up a clip because that particular manifestation of the character, I was watching it, and you're a fan of SNL, right?
Sure.
Do you remember Mr. Peepers?
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Chris Kattan. So I was watching that. I think this was the inspiration for Mr. Peepers.
That is not a bad call.
This is Mr. Peepers. He comes to us from the Amazon rainforest and is a descendant of the Eosimius primate.
Yeah, that is a good callback right there. So yeah, Mr. Peepers might have been inspired by this movie.
I think so, because when he regresses, he's much smaller.
So his little caveman guy, very agile, looks pretty clear that they just got a stunt guy doing parkour. And so he's in the pen with elephants. I was actually nervous that he was going to get stomped or trampled or eaten. But no, he's king of the jungle. He's trying to eat raw meat. He kills an animal and then he eats it. And then they find its dead body and then he's back to normal the next day. It's kind of got a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde or Wolfman thing where he becomes this creature. And that's why I was like, okay, so why exactly are you doing these experiments? They don't seem to be going well. He's kind of an obsessive dude. The other thing I want to say about this movie, we might have to drop in a clip here because it is hard to communicate. There's something about the way these people speak to each other that I just find very odd. First, I love in movies where Harvard professors are constantly announcing that they're Harvard professors. They're going, I'm a professor at Harvard. I love that. And there's a line where he's dating Emily. And I actually stopped the movie to find the screenplay to read this little speech she gives.
You're an unmitigated madman. You don't have to tell me how weird you are. I know how weird you are. I'm the girl in your bed the past 2 months. Even sex is a mystical experience for you. You carry on like a flagellant, which can be very nice, but I sometimes wonder if it's me that's being made love to. I feel like I'm being harpooned by some raging monk in the act of receiving God.
The hell is she talking about? The characters talk in this kind of affected voice or tone that just sounds very odd.
Yeah, it did have that almost stage performance or stage type dialogue where they were talking over each other so quickly. It was really hard to kind of parse out what they were saying at times. And I did read that the director, Ken Russell, had done quite a bit of work to cut back or rework some of the author's script because it was so wordy and not a natural way of speaking. I think the writer actually quit the project or pulled his name from it.
Pulled his name off it, yeah.
Yeah. Some of what you're calling out sounds like a source of tension.
I felt like this was written by a guy on ketamine, taking ketamine while he writes the screenplay for a movie about ketamine and mescaline and acid, whatever. It just seems like the story and the visuals and the way the characters talk, it's all like a little weird and a little off.
Yeah. So it's not ketamine. They said they were going down to Mexico and it was the Hinchi tribe, Amantia muscaria, looks like the Super Mario mushroom, and then they were taking this other herb, Sinikiwichi.
Yeah, like, I don't know if these are real things.
Yeah. Well, they are, but I don't think those are the go-to psychedelics. So yeah, maybe he had been dabbling with those, and it affected his mental state as he was writing.
So you're watching it again. Was it all coming back to you from the 80s?
Yeah, I thought it held up pretty well too in terms of the effects. There was some stuff that was not up to par, but visually I felt it still had a high level of impact, and even the soundtrack and sound effects were very disorienting. The other thing that stood out, this is a horror movie. I think the kill count besides the goat or gazelle or whatever is 0. Like no one dies in this movie. Like there's the one night watchman who gets clubbed, but I don't think he actually killed him. So you've got a horror movie that is just more about the terror of watching this guy run himself to a place that everybody's watching as a bystander, thinking exactly what you articulated. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
To what benefit?
Can you explain what happens at the end of this movie? There's like this whirlwind, and then his head is spinning, and I don't even know what I was watching. What the hell is going on?
That final sequence when he's gone into the tank, and there are all around him. It's Emily and Mason, and
Emily's his wife, right?
Yeah, and then Arthur is the other scientist friend. Yeah, he reaches that point where he's hit, I guess, source or whatever. There's this energy explosion thing.
Yeah, he's like regressed to like pre-humanity or something.
Yeah, and his face distorts and this bloated. I've always found that extremely disturbing. So it's this release of energy, this vortex and void, and then it's that final scene is he's gone to that primordial self, but then he fights back because of her love is what brings him back, which is
that what you got from that scene? Okay.
That was always my takeaway, that like her love and caring for him brought him back to the human self versus going into this primordial energy, and then he's kind of thrashing in the hallway, banging himself back, and then he connects with her, and they both come back together. So what was your take?
Yeah, it's kind of abstract, right? It's like he's losing it. What I found confusing is they didn't seem that close to me. Like the movie had not made clear to me that they had a relationship where he and his wife were like deeply connected in a way that she could bring him back. Like, so I was confused by what was happening because I felt like it wasn't really set up in the story. The way they talk to each other, the way they engage with, I think they'd been separated. So the movie is trying to communicate that they have come back together, but I found myself scratching my head. Why is she bringing him back? And does she still love him? I don't understand what their relationship is. I don't know what the hell William Hurt's going to do. You've seen him regress to become like a monster, so you feel like it's hard to predict where this movie is going to go next. That's probably the thing I would say about it that I like the best is it was definitely unpredictable. While I was watching it, scene to scene, I had no idea what in the hell the next scene was going to be about. I don't remember this movie from the 80s at all, so this is the first time I saw it.
Were there things that you liked about it, or what stood out to you as the biggest flaw?
The thing I liked the best about it was the visual inventiveness. I like the scenes where they're trying to communicate using like 80s movie technology what it's like to have this hallucination. That seemed kind of cool to me. There's a scene where he sees this goat that's got like 8 eyeballs, like kind of like spider eyes. But then it's like a goat head on a man's body, and then the goat man body's being crucified. I thought, well, this is like experimental, weird stuff. So for a mainstream movie in 1980, I thought, wow, this is a pretty wild movie. But then the actual like plot of the movie, it doesn't have the kind of classic structure of what is this guy trying to accomplish, and how are we going to know when he gets there? Because I couldn't tell if the movie was going in a direction that was making him better or worse. It wasn't clear to me ultimately how was the movie going to end. Was he going to succeed or fail? Like, that's a basic question I have about this movie. Did he accomplish whatever it is he was trying to accomplish? I have no idea. What do you think?
I think he did, because he got to the end when he got in touch with Source God or whatever he was seeking. He framed it up as his father did. He's like, it was terrible. Like, and all those visions of hell. Essentially, he had basically a bad trip for the entire movie. Right. Got to the end, was like, well, that was, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. And then I guess at the end, he's better. He's done. He's gotten what he wanted to.
I guess so. And then, what he really needed was love. So, maybe they got back together, got married again. So sort of that cliche happy ending. This was a really strange movie. 1980, just imagining how they were pitching this one to Hollywood, the story that we just talked about, it had a pretty big budget. I think it was originally $9 million. They went over budget, $4 million or so. So it was a $15 million film in 1980. Ken Russell talked about how Hollywood, he'd heard all these terrible things about it. The last movie he made was a few years before, and it was a bomb. So they put him on as the second director. The cast was a bunch of no names. They were way over budget. And Ken Russell talks about, there was no pressure on money. My hunch is like somebody was looking for a tax write-off with this one. They were thinking, this sucker's going to bomb. We're just going to write this up. But actually, it made around $20 million, and it had a legacy. So it did pretty well. And it, obviously set William Hurt's career off in a good direction. But it's definitely an odd movie. I can't think of another one that falls into this category.
So I think that the movie just really wanted to do like these kind of experimental kind of effects and visuals that were just not the kind of thing that Hollywood normally made.
Yeah. Somebody, I think, described Ken Russell, his visual approach is Fellini-esque, like just kind of over the top and very dramatic and theatrical.
The fact this movie got made, hats off. It does feel like a different era of Hollywood. I don't think Hollywood ever make a movie like this today. I'm not even sure Netflix would make a movie like this today.
This certainly didn't turn into a film series or ongoing property. This was one and done. On the visual front, even the title credits for the film, I always thought was really well done in terms of the way the type was coming together at the beginning for the opening sequence. And then the poster, just a lot of impactful visuals that stuck out to me as a kid. And then also even now, I think hold up pretty well. The guy that did the poster art was John Alvin, who He did E.T., Blade Runner, Gremlins, Goonies.
Wow.
Spies Like Us. Even went into doing a lot of Disney stuff, but so he was like the go-to guy for Hollywood posters, and this one was well done.
You like the poster?
I do. He plays out in the movie too. It's a disturbing view of him. He's upside down. He's this pale color with the electrodes coming out. It really captured that kind of coldness and isolation that comes through in certain scenes early in the movie when they're showing the tank for the first time. It was never at a normal angle. Everything was slightly off kilter.
Right.
Just slightly tweaked to be a bit more unsettling, and the movie poster plays into that quite well also. Where are you at with the rating?
I gotta admit, I didn't love Altered States. It didn't alter my state enough. I liked the visuals of it. I thought it was inventive to look at. Story-wise, plot-wise, I found a lot of the time I was like, well, why is this guy doing this? Does his wife love him? And at the end, where she's the one who rescues him, I feel like that's not really set up in the movie that they actually have this kind of intimate relationship. So I gotta say, I give Altered States just one stab.
What?
I didn't love it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I know. It's going to be controversial.
Sure. That was one of the critiques of this movie, that there were zero likable characters in this film. The movie was very cold. Like the aspect of humanity, the love that kind of is what brings resolution to the story.
Yeah.
Does seem to be nobly absent.
Right.
As the movie progresses.
Yeah. So you tell me.
All right. This is something I think is going to come up as we go back into these films. Your perception, or the individual's perception, is going to be based on point in time where they saw this movie for the first time. It has heavy influence versus seeing it cold for the first time as a 50-year-old. So I've got layers to this. So I'm going to give it 3 steps. To me, it visually held up. The scenes that stood out to me and were burned into my brain were still quite believable. The special effects, the regression. I was generally creeped out when the line starts to get blurred between, is he just having hallucinations, or like they do the x-ray and he's actually, his bone structure is changing to an orangutan. And for me as a kid, I was probably watching Godzilla, clicked over to Land of the Lost, and I wound up on this. I was like, what the hell? Sensory deprivation tanks, you got psychedelics, and those two things leading to this guy turning into a primitive form of man rampaging through the city definitely captured my attention as a young boy.
You're making a really good point that there's other movies we're going to talk about that I have affection for these movies because as a child, they altered my perception of reality. This movie I could see being really formative.
We talked about Pumpkinhead last week. Both of us saw that for the first time. And you would ask me the question, would this be scary to you as a 12-year-old? And I was thinking, well, maybe it would. And then one of our listeners had reached out with a comment sharing that he had Pumpkinhead in his house on VHS growing up. So he had watched Pumpkinhead as an 8-year-old, and he's like, that movie was scary AF. And basically say he was terrified of Pumpkinhead, where we both thought Pumpkinhead was high comedy.
That is really fun. I'd love to hear from more people who watch these movies at a younger age and how they reacted to it and how it affected them, because this movie is pretty messed up. If you see it at a young age, I could really see you being scarred by the visuals.
Yeah. It was one of my fears, getting lockjaw and then regressing to a former state of my primordial self, always on my radar.
Wait, I don't remember lockjaw being a fear of yours.
Oh, growing up, lockjaw, man, you didn't want that. You step on the rusty nail and then your jaw locks up.
Okay, so let me ask you about lockjaw for a second. Is the fear that you can't talk, or is the fear that your face is frozen? What exactly?
Yeah, you couldn't open your jaw. You'd be eating and drinking through a straw. To me, that seemed terrifying, that your face would be frozen in place, and you'd probably have to knock your tooth out and shove a straw in there to get your meal.
That's really funny. I do think that that kids have these like crazy, insane childhood fears. And maybe watching a movie, it's almost kind of like the opposite of a fetish. Some people believe that something you interact with or see as a kid becomes this sexual fetish for you. But sometimes horror movies are like the opposite thing, where you see something and then you're kind of like permanently traumatized by it.
Yeah.
I wanted the movie to go further than it did. Like just become totally off the deep end. But you know what? Maybe it wasn't possible to portray something like that, like weirder than it actually was. Maybe this was like the limitation of the technology at the time.
Him turning into a glowing blob in an isolation tank where the room turns into a whirlpool wasn't weird enough.
Yeah. How much weirder do I want it to get?
What are you looking for, man? I'll get you some fly Garrick and send it in the mail to you. If you like Slashback Cinema, please subscribe and like us on the socials. Join us next week when we review and discuss the cult classic Basket Case.